just in presentation mode. So, hello everyone. This is Matt Parker, also known as Double Tap, and thanks for joining us for this the very first webinar for the class of 2018. We're doing this a lot earlier this year, which I think is a good thing. And this first webinar is primarily focused on safety and the dangers, for lack of a better word, that you're going to face when hiking the trail. It's not to try and scare you or fear-monger any of that sort, but we just want to make you aware of the main things that you're going to run into and how to make safe and smart and sound decisions when you run into, whether it be water management in the desert, snow in the Sierras, or fires that always seem to pop up anywhere along the trail, especially in the Pacific Northwest. I do ask everyone to put their phones on mute unless you're speaking, although right now it's pretty quiet, so I appreciate that. And we're just going to jump right into it. During this session, there can be questions that are asked here in the chat box, which I've already seen some of you guys using, and there's also this Q&A box up here, so feel free to ask questions as we go along. This is a real open forum. Feel free to ask them audioly too. That's probably better, so you can interrupt us at any time. The main thing is to get information to you that you need, so feel free to chime in at any time. So having said that, we'll jump right into it. So the agenda here, it's pretty straightforward. It's only 20 slides, so I don't think it'll take too long. I want to make sure we leave time for questions and answers too. But the whole reason for doing this is, last year was a very unique year for the PCT for a variety of reasons. One, it was a very high snow level year. We had a lot of fires in the Pacific Northwest. And unfortunately, we had a few deaths occur, more so than usual. And so we wanted to kind of highlight, what happened with some of those fatalities, and what could have been done to maybe avoid them, so we don't run into any of those issues this year. I'll talk a little bit about the water report, which I help maintain with Half Mile. And although I usually do a separate webinar on the water report, which I'll do probably in January, February of next year. We'll spend a lot of time, most of the time probably on Sierra, snow, and special gear, the passes, potential exit points, and we have Ned Tibbetts as a speaker on that front. And we're also going to spend some time on the water crossings, because that's what proved to be the most deadly last year, with two of the deaths, unfortunately. Methods for crossing and stuff like that, and just some general tips. Also spend some time on the fires and resources that are available to you. I know Jack, everyone owes Jack a beer for all the work he did last year in keeping all the detours up to date. And I mean, it was just a constant battle. I mean, after like a solid month there, I think Jack was uploading things every day to the PCTA website. And then we'll finish off with questions and answers. But just to let you know who's on the line here, we'll give each person a few seconds to introduce themselves. Many of you may already know me, or maybe you don't, but I'm also known as Double Tap. I maintain the water report with Half Mile. I thru hiked in 2014. I live in California, and the Sierras are in my backyard. I spend a lot of time in the summers up there. Ned, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. My name is Ned Tibbetts. I'm the Director of Mountain Education. It's a nonprofit public charity wilderness school. We've been at it 35 years to try and teach folks how to stay safe in the mountains so that they can enjoy it with peace of mind. And so I hiked PCT in 1974, CDT 1980, and I served on search and rescue teams for a couple of different sheriff's departments, a professional ski patroller. I'm working right now for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, trying to help the hurricane survivors, of which there are 4-point-something million that we're helping. But anyway, got a lot of information to share tonight. We'll try not to carry on for too long, and I think Matt plans on doing another one of these in the future, but we just wanted to kind of clue everybody into the realities of the trail, what you're really going to be seeing, and how to deal with it.
Perfect. And Jack, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure, thanks. My name is Jack Haskell. Trail name is Found. I'm an employee of the Pacific Crest Trail Association, and we work to do all things PCT. We're a membership organization, about 12,000 members, about 2,500 volunteers. It's a real passion project behind the Pacific Crest Trail. I thru hiked in 2006 on the PCT. I've done the CDT and the Colorado Trail. And my role at PCTA is really all things hikers. So I've probably talked to a couple of thousand of you already, and if you ever have a question, just pick up the phone and call up the association, and I'm happy to chat.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Jack. And Annie may or may not join. I asked Annie to join if she could because she was a thru hiker last year. Annie, if you're on the line, go ahead and chime in right now and interrupt me. Otherwise, I'll continue because I think you said you might be late. But I asked her to join because Annie was one of the few who actually did hike through the Sierra last year in the June timeframe, you know, typical timeframe for Sierra, but it was such a high snow year that she teamed up with 4 or 5 other hikers, and I tracked their progress via the water report because we also added a section for the conditions of the Sierra high passes and the river crossings. And I wanted to have a hiker give her perspective on that experience last year and the benefits that she saw from going into that situation as a group. So if she joins, she'll chime in there. Now, you know, having said that, there's a few general comments here just to kind of keep in the back of your mind. This presentation will be uploaded to the PCTwater.com website. Give me a few days to do that after this, but it will be there. Also, we'll post a link to the PCT Water YouTube channel, which will have a recording of this webinar that we're doing right now. All the mileage points you're going to see referencing here are all referenced to half-mile mileage points. I don't know if for the ones who've done preparation, you probably know who Half Mile is. He's the one who does, you know, the maps for the PCT, which the majority of the hikers use. We're going to be referring to 2017 a lot in this presentation because that was a very unique year for the reasons I mentioned previously, but more so on the fact that it was a very heavy snow year, and we just started our winter here in California, so we really don't know what it's going to be like in 2018. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Just a few other points on snow here that I won't spend too much time on, but you know, your mileage is going to be, your daily mileage is going to be reduced. Snow just slows you down, basically. But Ned and I will be doing another Sierra webinar later, probably in February, March of next year, that really goes into the details of Sierra planning and snow and all that stuff. Okay, I'm just going to jump right into it, and I will try to go back and forth here and see if there's any questions, but I don't see any yet, so okay. But a couple of things on water. So dehydration is a potential issue that you can run into, especially in the Southern California section, but a lot of people don't realize that there are some pretty long, dry, waterless stretches in Northern California and Southern Oregon, surprisingly more in Southern Oregon. So the PCT Water Report, it's a very easy, you know, it's a free service to use. I got the website here. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll do a separate webinar on water in general and water management. But you can go there, you can look at all the water updates, you know, per half-mile mileage points. And the way it works is you guys are the ones who are sending us the information, and you can send it to any of the 3 methods down here below that I'm highlighting via email, via text, or call. And Half Mile and or myself, we check it multiple times during peak hiking season, which is April through November. And I like to emphasize November because the SOBO is often asked, you know, hey, what about us? Yeah, we're looking out for you guys too as you get into the driest section of trail in November when you're getting close to Mexico. But one of the things we did add last year is we added a page for the Sierra High passes and also the water crossings. So it's really important when you do get back into cell phone coverage to send us updates on that, because we want to keep that updated so hikers know what's coming up against for those things. Just a couple of notes here. We did add a Facebook page last year too as another option, just FYI, and I manage that group. But I do ask that if you send in updates, try to use one of the 3 methods down here below, because Facebook is not always easy to. As I get notified, sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle. So the 3 methods down here are the best ways to do it. But you can upload photos and videos and stuff, and I highly encourage that. It's just an information resource for hikers. But 2 notes I want to really emphasize here, and the emphasis of safety, since that's what we're talking about tonight, is the first one is never rely on water caches. You're probably already sick of hearing that, but we're just going to keep on saying it and beating this dead horse because it's really important. The third gate cache at mile 91 is probably the most reliable cache on the entire trail. It's been maintained for many, many years, and the wonderful volunteers who keep that up and going. But you really cannot look at the water report or look at your half-mile map and assume that any cache that you're going to be coming up to is going to have water there. And the reason I emphasize this is especially over the last 5 or 6 years, and Jack can probably attest to this, just the number of permits that have gone up, the number of hikers has dramatically increased, and so it's been really difficult for the trail angels to keep up with these water caches. I think the third gate cache is the only one that had never gone dry until last year. We actually had reports of a few times during the year where it did go dry, which was a big surprise to me. So bottom line, never rely on them. They're nice to have once you come across them if they're up to date. And the second point on water that I really want to stress is, and we've seen this happen many times, is a lot of people try to go, as I call, go for broke their very first day from the U.S.-Mexico border at Campo to Lake Marina, which is about 20 miles. And, if you've already been hiking a few months, 20 miles is no big deal. But this is your first day out there. It's going to be hot. And more importantly, at about mile 15, you hit about a 1,000-foot climb coming out of Hazard Creek. And I've seen this time and time again. Hikers push themselves way too much on that first day, and some get to Lake Marina, and they're done. Their hike is done. They're spent. And unfortunately, there was one death a couple of years ago in 2014 when I hiked a hiker at Lake Marina. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Dry camping is not the worst thing in the world. It's not my favorite, but it is an option. You can always pick up a few liters at a water source, hike another few miles, and dry camp. It's not the end of the world. So just looking to see if there's any questions. And we'll be posting information on when I'll be doing the PCT Water webinar, because in that webinar I spent a lot more time too on water management and some of the drier sections of the trail, especially section F of California, which has some pretty long stretches. But moving on to the topic of snow, I do like to highlight this because a lot of people don't realize this until they start, is that you can run into snow before you hit the Sierra. You are on the Pacific Crest Trail, which is on the crest of many mountain ranges, and you can hit snow as early as mile 42 from the border in Mount Laguna. More often than not, San Jacinto around mile 170 is where hikers typically run into first snow. And unfortunately, we did have a death there back in 2005. A PCT hiker got caught up near the top of San Jacinto in a whiteout condition and unfortunately passed away. But the key point here, and this is straight from the locals in Idlewild, which is a town very close to the PCT on Mount San Jacinto, is that you can get storms anytime before Mother's Day. So you can kind of use that as a gauge in your mind. But the overall point that we're trying to get across here is we see hikers every year who don't think they need shelter, tents, don't think they need rain gear or anything like that in the desert portion, and it's just false, because you can run into snow in many of these places. I mean, you're up near 8,000, 9,000 feet on San Jacinto, so I'd hate to be caught up there with no shelter or tent. And I just highlighted here a few of the other places in Southern California that you can see, Big Bear area, Mount Baden-Powell. They're not as high as the Sierras, but they're still pretty high mountains that can get snow. Questions? So on the topic of snow, this slide just kind of shows you some of the gear that I'm going to let Ned talk about now. And if you download these presentations, you'll see there are hyperlinks here, and they should work. But from a 10,000-foot overview, if you're going to enter the Sierras when there's significant snow, and ice axes, or with it, which Ned will describe the difference between the two in a second, are recommended, along with some kind of traction device, whether it be microspikes or crampons. And then before I hand it over to Ned here on the gear, I do want to highlight that it is required by law to carry a bear canister in the national parks. As a matter of fact, between miles 754 and 997, it is required. And I've highlighted some new areas too that are pretty recent in terms of needing a bear canister below. For example, the third bullet point down in the last one, in Lassen National Park between mile 1344 and 1363. If you camp there overnight, it is legally required to have a bear canister with you. So with that, Ned, do you want to spend a few seconds here and talk about the difference between ice axe and whippets and microspikes and crampons?
Yeah, I would. But first, I want to back up to Southern California. And can you hear me, Matt?
Yeah, I can hear you. And I went back to the slide.
Okay. Yeah, there's just a sound lag. I want to underscore that if you are going through Southern California early in the season, realize that this is effectively high desert. The nights can be freezing. So just because you're in sunny California where it never rains, supposedly, be prepared to maybe get some pretty good rain. If you're up high in elevation, you may get snow. Also, Fuller Ridge on the northwestern side of Mount San Jacinto is on, the trail traverses a slope that faces to the north, therefore it's in shade and can be very icy, especially if there's perhaps a foot or two around by the time you get there. So what that's going to mean, and what I'm getting to, is should I have traction devices for my feet or not? Hiking crampons, microspikes, and so forth. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but I just wanted to remind everybody that Matt talked about there is snow in Southern California, and indeed there is, especially Baden-Powell and that whole area at the top of the slide there, where people die every year. Not necessarily PCT hikers, but largely tourists and so forth going up for a walk, hey, I got snow, well, we can keep going. And they're totally unprepared and they end up sliding down the mountain. And typically search and rescue's got to get out there and recover them, not rescue them, but recover the fatality. So I wanted to underscore that. Now, regarding traction devices, let's hit on that one. Micro spikes are basically held to your feet with a rubber band. There are other ways it can be attached. Matter of fact, I've even used my shoelaces to try and hold the darn thing on my foot. Here's the thing I want you to remember. The takeaway is that as long as you're walking on a surface that is flat, side to side, like you're walking in the footsteps of somebody else that's already packed down the snow, or 20, 30 other hikers have made a little trail in the snow, you're fine for the most part with microspikes. But if you want to venture somewhere else, say you see the trail, this boot track in the snow is going like the wrong way, and you want to go off in a different tangent, and you hit some steep traverses, that's where microspikes have a tendency to roll off sideways off your feet, and any kind of loss of traction means you go down or could go down. So we require our students to only bring Cthulhu's hiking crampons. Don't bring 12-point climbing crampons with fangs sticking out the front, because they may catch your Achilles tendon of the opposite leg or cut up your lower leg on the other, one leg or the other, and that's an injury that's going to take you off the trail, or an infection that's going to cause you to go home or to the emergency room. So no climbing crampons, everybody. Hiking crampons have points in front, yes, but they're turned down. So they're far safer. What else, Matt? We want to talk about the whippet now?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, I just didn't want to hog the time or the airspace here. Okay, what you're looking at on the slide is basically a trekking pole or a ski pole, which is how it was intended, with a ice axe type, pick on the top. The best thing about it is that it's always in your hand. You never know when you're going to go down. It's presumptuous unless you've been trained to identify slopes in advance before you get there. Through hikers are typically just talking about hamburgers and talking about this or that and stay balanced and all of that. And there you go. And so they're not really thinking risk awareness or risk recognition ahead. So before they know it, they're on a bad slope and they're going like, holy cow, what do I do now? And they can't even take their packs off to get the ice axe off their pack. So the whippet is always in your hand. If you suddenly go down, it doesn't mean you have to slip. You can simply post hole, and then next thing you know, you're and something breaks or you get lacerated really bad and you're going to be flown out anyway. So the self-arrest pole, in this case the Black Diamond Whippet, is a combination of things. It's not intended to be a mountaineering tool, but we teach how to do self-arrest all winter using whippets, and I have yet to have one break or fail. So it's wonderful to have them in your hand. Of course, prevention is the key. Having two poles helps you control your balance so you don't have to worry about falling and needing to self-arrest or stop your slide and tumble.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ned. Appreciate that. Let's see if there's any questions. Not yet. You guys are a quiet bunch. Feel free to ask any questions at any time. Okay, Ned, so I went to the next slide here. I don't know if you can see it yet, but maybe you want to spend just a few seconds talking about the classes you offer.
Thanks. What we're going to try and do this year is to get hikers prepared for snow issues during the powder snow month of January, February, March, April by offering 1-day, 2-day, and 3-day courses. They're not up on the website yet. We finally had a chance to get our board of directors together to make these decisions. And then come May, we'll be running 11-day trips from Kennedy Meadows over Fort, which is a big departure from things we've done in the past, which were much shorter because we were able to access Horseshoe Meadows and Cottonwood Pass, which we can't. Last year was really hard, so we ruled it out, and we'll be picking up, if anybody's interested in learning their snow skills, we'll be starting at Kennedy Meadows and going north. So right where you first hit the steep stuff, we'll teach you how. Let's see, what else? So there's so much to talk about, I'm almost overwhelmed. So anyway, that's the gist of what we do, what we offer. Unfortunately, we don't do anything in Southern California we used to, but the amount of snow down there is so unpredictable. We used to teach on San Jacinto, and we've had to rule it out. But anyway, that's kind of what we're going to be doing this year, and you'll see the classes posted on the school website soon.
Perfect. Thanks, Ned.
Yeah.
So moving on here, so I want to talk a little bit about maps, apps, and GPS here. So, you know, I referenced Half Mile Maps earlier. I got the hyperlink here. It's a free service. I don't think he hasn't uploaded the 2018 version yet because we're doing these a little earlier than we typically do. But he usually gets those up in the January time frame. So I would just check his website every now and again. And I don't know if Yogi is doing the same service he did the last 2 years, but she has a really good deal where you can buy and she'll print all of them for you and ship them to you. And in the end, it actually saves you money because speaking of someone who actually printed out all the maps on his own printer, I spent a good $100 just on printer ink alone. But anyways, check closely, you know, on that, and he'll update it and he'll say when the 2018 versions are there because the trail changes every year. And a lot of the stuff, especially the information that he has on towns or resupply addresses and stuff like that, they can change. So make sure you have the 2018 version before you embark on your journey. The next item there are Tom Harrison maps. I'm a firm believer in these. I use them in my hikes all the time. They're extremely durable, and more importantly, they give you a wider view. Half Miles maps are great, but they're very, you know, focused in on the PCT itself. These Tom Harrison maps just kind of give you potential exit points, which I think is a really good thing to have. I mean, you could even just buy some of the old Atlas books. I've always had like California ones in my house that I zip up and put in my bag, just so I know, hey, if I get into trouble, you know, if I go 10 miles to the east here or 10 miles to the west here, there's a road or something that I can get to help myself out. So that's why I like to kind of emphasize with Tom Harrison. Of course, yeah, on the app side, Half Mile has its PCT app. Guthus app is wonderful. I should have mentioned that on the water report slide because a lot of hikers, including myself, we end up using a combination of both the water report and Guthus app to get water updates. We have been trying to work with Gut Hook and his team to meld the two together, but unfortunately our systems are just so different. It's a little difficult to do. So I recommend use the Water Report and Gut Hook staff to get recent water updates. HikerBot is another app that a hiker created last year that I got some pretty good feedback on, so something to check out, and I believe that's a free application. But the last point here I want to talk about is really important, and that's some kind of two-way communication device, some kind of GPS beacon. For myself, and I believe Ned is the same, we both use the inReach device. It's a really good device. I think it's so much more reliable than the Spot device, which I used for many years, but I started running into issues with it where it would say it sent out an I'm okay message and it never did, and this happened multiple times. So I switched over to the inReach, and speaking for myself, I've actually used it to get a thick JMT hiker airlifted out of Kings Canyon National Park. So I've seen it work, and I think it's really important that if you by yourself that you have one of these, or if you go in a group that at least one person has one of these. Because if you get into trouble, if the group gets into trouble, you need to have some kind of way of communicating to the outside world, and not for yourself, but also for the search and rescue people team, who are putting their lives in danger trying to get to you. There's too many stories out there, and I won't go into details, but there's a few on the PCT where hikers have just disappeared, and they've never been seen again, and they're still searching for them. I would like to think if they had some kind of two-way device that could have been avoided, because not only is their life in risk, so is the search and rescue team. And Ned, I think you said that you've actually used your inReach to get people airlifted out before too, right?
Yeah, I just want to say that the Delorme, or however you say that name, has been bought by Garmin, so it's really a Garmin device, but it's called the Garmin Delorme Explorer. I think it was an Explorer Plus or something like that I used last year. We had to call in the helicopter twice. Of course, this was during May, so there's a lot of snow. We had snowstorms. We had people with altitude sickness, injuries. And so the beauty is that you can actually have two-way communications. There's not the hope that I wonder if the signal got out. Because you're texting back and forth. It's not so much voice; it's by text, and it's through the satellite. So it's certain. We were texting in really bad snowstorms, and the weather didn't cause us to lose our signal. So it worked perfectly. You were assured that you got the guys coming at the right time in the right place. They knew where you were, and you could coordinate when the helicopter arrived, or know when he was going to be delayed. So it's really a great device. I know it's a bit more expensive, but ounce for ounce, there's certain things you've got to invest in, and I'm just very happy to endorse this device. It's the way to go.
Yeah, and just a quick note on that. So we don't get paid to endorse any of these devices.
Exactly.
This is just our own personal opinion through your own personal experience. And so that's that. Ned, there was a question about, does the Whippet replace the ice axe? Do you want to tackle that one real quick?
Yeah, let's tackle that. It comes up every year, and it's a very good question because an ice axe is a mountaineering tool. It's certified. It's the definitive device for creating anchors, for self-belaying, for self-arresting, for a multitude of things. However, hikers who find themselves on snow are not necessarily trained in all the ins and outs of the use of an ice axe, and so typically either buy one that's too short, too light, ineffective, whatever, and they don't know, like I said to begin with, they don't know how to identify the risk ahead so that they have the ice axe in their hand when and if they should go down. So it can't replace an ice axe. A self-arrest pole can't replace an ice axe in all of the things that an ice axe can do. However, for the classic, typical ski mountaineer or backcountry skier or snow hiker, of which all the PCT2 hikers are, summer hikers finding themselves on snow, the Whippet, I think, is or there are other devices like it. I think Gazelle has one. It's really the best compromise. We require it of all of our students. Of course, teach them how to use it. Length is not an issue. What is an issue is that you can't, of course, use it for self-belay. It's not intended to be thrust all the way into the snow, and then you use it to pull yourself up the steep incline. And it does have a big basket on the bottom, so you're not going to ram it into the snow anyway in that manner. But because balance or loss thereof precipitates falls, having two, you only need one whippet too, by the way. So whippets in one hand and a regular pole with a snow basket on the other hand, they keep you from going down. Should you go down, chuck the other pole, hang on to the whippet, and use it for self-arrest.
Yeah, and just as a personal experience here, so I've been section hiking the Sierra High Route for the past 3 years, and I was just up there in October going over some of the high passes, and there was snow on there, and I had my ice axe with me. I should have listened more closely to Ned last year and buy a whippet, because there were some spots where I had to put on the traction device on my feet, and then the ice axe ended up being useless for me because it was so short. As I was descending down these passes with snow on them, I had to bend over a lot just to get the tip of the ice axe into the snow, and I was just thinking to myself, this is pointless. So yeah, I will be buying a whippet this year for Ned's recommendation. And there was another question. If I have an ice axe, what info is best to use to determine whether I should take an ice axe versus whippet or just hiking poles? I think you kind of already answered that, Ned, but is there anything else you wanted to add to that front?
Not sure what he means by what info is best to use to determine whether I should take an ice axe. Okay, let me approach this from a little bit of broader stroke, and it's come up earlier in some of our discussions right before the webinar tonight. I've noticed on the Facebook groups, people have been talking about start times, and when am I going to actually be entering the Sierra, and what should I anticipate, and if it's a light winter versus a heavy winter versus it doesn't matter. You're going to have to deal with snow at some point. It doesn't also matter if it is. What matters is that you'll be walking on top of it. It freezes every night. So whether you're on a foot or you're on 25 feet, which we usually are, in a heavy winter during the month of May, there can be a lot of snow. But a lot of snow doesn't mean, oh my God, I'm going to die. It just means you're walking on snow. So don't freak out about how much snow may come down this winter. You're just going to be walking on the snow. So there really isn't, as you asked, what might be a determining factor. Go prepared for snow. Go prepared for maintaining your balance. 2 decent poles, and I'm not talking about the really carbon guys, because if you've ever fallen with a carbon pole, most of the time it just breaks. An aluminum pole may bend, and then you can bend it back, and you're golden. Also, 3 sections of a pole means the section is very small in diameter. Great if you're, flicking your poles summer hiking, swinging them, you want low swing weight and all that sort of stuff. But in snow, when you lose your balance, you're going to ram that sucker into the snow to try and keep your head from going downhill, because that's where your head's going to go. So you want a really strong, larger diameter pole, 2 sections instead of 3. I'm probably getting carried away here, Matt, but to get back to the main point, it doesn't matter. Take the normal gear that you walking in snow. Really heavy winter, what that's going to mean is your snow lines are going to be way down in elevation, maybe down around 9,000 feet, 9,500 feet, 10,000 feet. So take a look at your topo maps. Where am I going to cross 10,000 foot mark, and how many miles do I have to go before I get to the 12,000? And that'll tell you, and don't forget, it's a mile an hour on snow. So you're gonna need to go prepared for snow, even if it's a light winter. Mine will be up a little higher.
All right, thanks, Ned. So FEMA, you said, can I speak more in the microphone? I'll do what I can. It may be an issue with your speakers too, so let me know if it's not safe. Can you hear me okay, Ned?
Yeah, you're cutting in and out pretty bad.
Okay, let me see. I'll try and rearrange. Jimmy Gleason said weather reports on the inReach are nice too. Yeah, Jimmy, just a comment on that front. I have used the weather reports on the inReach. However, I will say this: they haven't always been entirely accurate for me. Maybe that's user error. I don't know. But it is another function on the inReach that is nice. I just don't know if I'm using it correctly.
Hey Matt, can I chime in on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just real briefly, weather reports, whether you're carrying a little transistor radio, I don't care how you get them, but that's really handy to have. What a weather report should do for you is cause you to look up. Take a look at the skies. What kind of clouds are coming in? What direction is the wind coming from? Are the real life, boots on the ground kind of info that's going to cause you to go, holy crap, I got a storm coming in. Okay, I had a little warning through the inReach or a radio, but like Matt said, it's not 100% accurate. It should open your eyes, cause you to look up and pay attention to your environment as it changes if a front should be either coming your way or going by you.
Good point, and a good segue into this next slide here, which kind of summarizes 18 of the passes in the Sierra that you're going to be running into. And I took this photo in 2007 on top of Mather Pass, which is one of the ones you'll go over, and you could see all the clouds around here. And I got nailed by this storm right after I took this picture, so I'm a victim of my own statements here. But one thing that you're going to run into in the Sierras, and I had to learn the hard way because I just started backpacking at the time, you get a lot of late afternoon thunderstorms in the Sierra, and you can get a cycle of them coming through like every day. You'll be hitting them around 4 or 5 o'clock, sometimes earlier, sometimes a little later. So the emphasis on the passes, which we'll talk about here in the next few slides, and we'll do a more detailed webinar on that later on, is that you want to get over the passes as early as possible for a variety of reasons. So one of them is so you don't get caught up on top of them when a strong thunderstorm hits. Because usually these thunderstorms, they're quick, but they're really intense. And they will drop hail, they will rain lightning down very close, a lot closer than you want. And they can be pretty scary. So if you can avoid being up high when they hit, that's better for you. But the other point to this slide that we just wanted to talk about was, there are some common misconceptions about, hey, I'll just exit here and it'll be easy. And one of those common misconceptions is using the side trail up to Mount Whitney. And you go over a pass here, it's the very first one called Trail Crest. Well, you're up at 13,600 feet, as you can see here, which is higher than Forester Pass, the highest point on the PCT. It's not always the easiest way to exit down into the Lone Pine area. In the next few slides here, we'll show you some other potential exit points that are close to it. But the point of this is to get you thinking about your Sierra Pass strategy. Because you're going to be going over a pass a day at minimum. Sometimes you can do 2 a day if you're really in shape, but I always shoot for 1 pass a day. And you can see the elevations here; they're pretty high up. So this next slide, it just gives you a graphical map representation of the PCT here. You can see the dash line. And most of the exit points are going to be towards the east. Not that there aren't some to the west. You can see in this map here in the middle where it says Cedar Grove, that's Kings Canyon National Park. That's a real common entry point coming from the west side. But one of the things that happened last year is that a bridge that goes down to there from the PCT got washed out. It's not the suspension bridge that the PCT is on, but to keep that in mind. And we'll go more into depth on that in the Sierra webinar presentation. I just wanted to have you guys start thinking about potential exit points and what are valid ones and which ones are not. So to elaborate a little bit further on that, you probably heard Kennedy Meadows mentioned a bunch of times. It's a pinnacle point to reach in your hike. It pretty much signifies the end of the high desert and the entrance into the high Sierra. But another important point to realize that it's kind of a point of no return, for lack of better words, until at least mile 744, and Kennedy Meadows is at 702, so we're talking a good 40-plus miles. Once you kind of start going north, you're kind of committed unless you turn around and go all the way back to Kennedy Meadows, because Mulkey Pass will be probably the first area where you can get off trail if you run into problems or you just want to go down into Lone Pine, which probably a lot of you will end up doing for resupply anyways. So just kind of think Kennedy Meadows, mile 702.
You got to.
That's an area where you need to make a decision. Go ahead, Ned.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody realizes that the Mulkey Pass, Trail Pass, exits down to Horseshoe Meadows and the road will not be open until, you know, mid-May or early in June. Last year was early in June. Other years, we've been doing this for many, many years. You know, some years, like light winters, it'll open mid-May. So don't go planning that, okay, I'm just going to take a 4-day supply or a 2-day supply and zip up to Horseshoe and, you know, bounce out to Lone Pine and come back in and go up to Whitney and Kearsarge. That sucker may not be open. Last year we had a heck of a time because it didn't open until early June, and yet we were still trying to teach our classes from there. And that road walk, oh my God, you guys do not want to do that road walk going down into Lone Pine, much less going up the thing. There are no cars when it's closed, and it's a long piece of hard asphalt.
Yeah, and last year there was even it was closed because of washouts for a time, and the reason I mention this is that it's one of the reasons we added the Sierra Pass and river crossings page to the water report, because I was updating road closures like that too, like important ones like this, because I knew a lot of people used this exit method if they got up to the Sierra and said, you know what, I don't like what I'm seeing because it was a real heavy snow year. I know of many hikers who got out right here at Trail Pass and Mulkey Pass, but it doesn't guarantee that the road down to Lone Pine is going to be open. So the key point, you know, download the water report as often as you get cell coverage, because it's going to change on a daily basis. So yeah, so Ned already kind of mentioned Mulkey Pass and Trail Pass. That's the next potential exit point here at mile 744, 745. And then shortly after that, you have Cottonwood Pass, mile 750. That also goes down to Horseshoe Meadow. So there's 3 passes there that'll get you down to that area. It's a huge, wide open, you know, flat meadow it's a huge campground that you can see if there's no snow on it. This is kind of your second exit point after Kennedy Meadows, if you're not comfortable with what you're seeing in the Sierra. And, you know, and we have no idea what it's going to be like next year at this time anyway, since our winter just started. So the next 2 slides, I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but I wanted to just kind of give everyone a roadmap or a plan for a one pass a day strategy, and you know, you'll be able to download these so you can, you know, take a look at them and strategize from there. But the idea here is using Tyndall Creek at mile 774, which is a couple miles before Forester Pass. This kind of gives you an outline on, okay, going over 1 pass a day. But the key point here is you want to camp as high as possible to minimize the time that you're going up and over the pass for 2 reasons. One, the late afternoon Sierra thunderstorms, which are common. But secondly, and most importantly, and I can personally attest to this, you want to avoid post-holing as much as possible. And for those of you who don't know what post-holing is, it's when you're walking on kind of soft, slushy snow, and all of a sudden your foot will just slam through, you know, solid snow, or you know, slushy snow for like 2 or 3 feet, and you don't know what you're going to hit underneath. And in 2014, in my through hike, that's exactly what happened to me coming down Forester Pass. I post-holed, I hit a rock, and I was dealing with a foot injury for the next 1,500 miles on the trail. Fortunately, it wasn't, you know, harsh enough to get me off trail, but it definitely was an issue. So you want to try to minimize your time in the late afternoon snow, because it's going to slow you down, and you're more prone to injury because of post-holing. So yeah, download these 2 slides. You can actually download them right now from the PCT Water website, because they didn't change from last year, and I don't expect to change it for this year. But, you know, start thinking about your Sierra strategy. You know, where are you going to resupply? You know, how are you going to tackle the passes? Do I want to do 1 pass a day? That's always been my recommendation. I mean, there's some hardcore people who can do, like, say, Mather and Pinchot in a day. If you can do it, great. But I don't think it's something that you have to shoot for. And another thing that I put on here in yellow are the potential exit points to the east. There's a bunch of passes. Most are maintained trails, some are not, to the east. That'll get you down into the Owens River Valley, the Highway 395 area where you can hitch a ride. But just keep in mind that the time of the year that you're going to be hitting these passes, they're not going to be exactly friendly to you, especially at the top, you know, until you get down a few thousand feet on the other side. And all of them are uphill from the PCT. So just kind of keep that in mind. Kearsarge is a very popular one, as you may have already heard. A lot of hikers end up going over Kearsarge to hitch a ride down into Independence to get a resupply. But Baxter, Sawmill, and Caboose, I've only been over Caboose and Kearsarge. Caboose is it's a long ways down, only to be used in case of emergency. So one side, we want to spend some time talking about water crossings because that ended up being the most deadly thing last year. And unfortunately, we lost 2 hikers. And the ones in red here are the areas where, unfortunately, those deaths did occur. So just want to highlight them to you, although they're not the only ones that are dangerous. Bear Creek at mile 869 is probably the most infamous one of them all. These are all ones to keep in the back of your mind and factor into your Sierra strategy. It's not just the passes, it's the creeks too. And the dilemma that every hiker faces is that, yeah, you want to get up and over the passes early, but often that means you're going to be going back down into a valley and hitting some kind of crossing later in the day. And the problem with that is the water can be higher in the afternoon due to snowmelt. And when I first heard this, I laughed and I thought it was false. But I've seen it actually happen, and it's pretty amazing how the difference you can see in the creek crossing with just a few hours. I've actually seen it go up a few feet in some places. So if you can try and hit these creek crossings earlier in the day, it's going to be a lot safer for you. Another thing that we're emphasizing is if it's a high snow year and the drainage is really causing some dangerous creek crossings, you want to group up with other people. It's one of the reasons I asked Annie to join us tonight. And Annie, if you're here, feel free to chime in on this at any time. But she got together with 4 or 5 other hikers, and they crossed all these dangerous crossings together as groups. And we have a video here that we can show you that actually comes from one of Ned's classes, and he'll talk through it. But the idea here is don't feel like you have to go alone at this, and it's actually a lot more dangerous. And as it turns out, the 2 deaths that occurred last year, they were solitary hikers. So take that as you will. Another point here is you don't have to cross right where the trail crosses the creek. Often, if you just go further upstream, you can find much safer options, and there won't be as much snow melt or water running. Bear Creek is a prime example. I got tons of updates last year from hikers who said there's no way they could have crossed Bear Creek right where the PCT crossed, but they went up a mile or a half a mile, and they were able to cross, multiple tributaries of Bear Creek that were a lot smaller and therefore a lot safer. So Ned, hey Ned, can you hear me? Ned.
Yeah, it's just Matt. You're cutting in and out. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So I'm going to put the.
Am I there?
Yeah.
Matt?
Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Okay, I've got a lot to say on the creek crossings. Whenever you want to turn me loose.
Yeah. So I'm showing the video right now, Ned. I don't know if you can see it or not, and there might be a lag. So if you can talk to it, I think that'd be great.
Okay, what you're watching is a crossing of, I think, Wright Creek. Yeah, there it is. It was in June of 2016, so water volumes weren't anything like what we saw this year. But what I want you guys to watch with each one of these people is that they're facing across the stream so that the force of the water, which most people don't understand until they're in it, how much push, end quote, water has. So you want it to be against the smallest part of your body, which would be, of course, your side or the sides of your legs, rather than against the front of you or any other broad part of your body. Also, you want to create a 3-point stance, as big a triangle as you can, using your poles. Fully extend your poles as much as you're able, and place them widely out in front of you and to the side of you. So that you've got a good tripod stance. You're moving across the creek so that you can lead with your toes. If you've ever tried to step sideways across boulders that you cannot see. And as soon as you pick up your foot, it's being pushed downstream. It's much easier to shuffle. In other words, just barely unweight your foot and slide it forward with your toes leading the way to find the next nice place to put your foot so that you can then put your weight on it, test it, okay, move my poles, shuffle the other foot. So there are lots of different ways to cross creeks. This is just what we teach our students, and you can cross in groups where you either hug everybody in a circle and do a lot of communicating, but what happens is that someone is going to end up going backwards or sideways, or you're going to run into a big giant boulder or something that everybody's got to maneuver around, and it's not that easy. There's another technique where you face upstream, and you can do it either singly or in groups. When I attended a swift water rescue class, they taught us across the bank, but I have seen videos of other people doing this crossing of creeks facing into the current. The problem is that you're heavily leaning on your poles, which are upstream, of course. And if you've ever noticed how a creek that's going over lots of boulders, it's inconsistent in force. It'll push hard, and then it'll be soft, and then it'll hit you from the left, and then it'll hit you from the right. And to be facing into the creek with a broad part of your body, not only do you have to lean into it, but when it's not hitting you hard, then you're really on your poles, if not landing on your face. So it's a lot safer, I believe, and we've been doing this 35 years, teaching people how to cross creeks during the thaw, to go and face the opposite bank, have a nice tripod stance like you see, shuffle your feet. You can't always see where your feet are going, so you have to feel your way. So I want to underscore, you do not have to cross the creek where the trail does. The creek is wide, means shallow, push of the water again. So go find it. You get to the creek and you see nothing but frothing, foaming water. Take a look at your map. Where's the nearest meadow? And go that way. Look for log crossings along the way, of course, but look for something that's flat, where the creek is more serpentine. That means it's flat. Also, you saw on that previous slide about Carrot Canyon. Beware, north of Tuolumne Meadows, in the northern washboard of Yosemite National Park, there are monster creeks with narrow canyons. The narrower the creek, the faster the flow, the deeper the water, the more white water. Hence, we had someone this summer. It's always been notorious for being narrow. So ultimately, you either, if you're worried about the creeks and creek crossings, enter the Sierra late, or as late as you know to get to Canada by first, usually about mid-September, or go in early. Go walking on snow. Snow may be covering the creeks. If you are in there any time after, which is about the end of May, early June, that's when the Sierra starts cooking and heating up and the creeks start getting crazy. That's when the creek crossings become the issue. Yeah, snow is slippery, but you can pretty much protect yourself a little better on snow than trying to deal with some of the nasty creeks that were happening this year.
Yeah, and just to kind of emphasize a little bit more here, we're only highlighting, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the more dangerous ones. That's at the tip of the iceberg, especially in a year last year where there was so much snow. The creek crossings were the most deadly part of the entire trail. So look at your half-mile maps, every night before you go to sleep, and look at what you're coming up against, or even better yet, before you camp, so you can get an idea of where you need to camp to try and minimize, late afternoon creek crossings. So it's not just these 6. These are just the 6 that Ned and I have highlighted that are potentially really bad. And unfortunately, the red ones are where the 2 deaths occurred last year. So just be very careful out there. And you know what? The best idea, if you can't find a good place to cross, don't cross. Turn around. I know it's not the ideal situation, but it's a lot better than than drowning in a creek. I mean,
Amen.
There's only two things that scare me up there. It's creek crossings and lightning. Sorry, was there a question, Ned? Yes.
Yeah, I was just wanting to point out, when you see on your slide there where it says South Fork of the Kings, you guys, you do not have to cross that thing. Take a look at your map, and it shows you crossing it twice. So when you first hit the South Fork of the Kings and you're going northbound, don't cross it if it looks horrible. Stay on the eastern side of it, and where does the river go? It goes right to, or rather I should say comes from, the area of Mather Pass. So just follow the creek right up to the pass. Stay on the right side of the creek or on the east side of the creek. It goes right where you want to go. You don't have to cross the thing, and it is a bad crossing.
Yeah, and this is where, a good topo map really comes in handy, because you can look at it and see, if I go further upstream, maybe there's more tributaries that lead down into this big ass creek I'm trying to cross right now. And to that point, I've seen this trend increasing every year for the past 4 or 5 years. More and more people are not bringing paper maps on the trail. They're just using their phones. And if that works for you, great. But phones fail, and I've heard it from many hikers. For whatever reason, they also run out of batteries. You can't always keep the things charged, because especially in the Sierra, you're going 200 plus miles without crossing a road. You have to make special attempts just to get to civilization to charge your electronics. So the point I'm trying to get across is, I always carry paper maps regardless, because paper maps don't fail. They're always there. So just take that as you will. Okay, I think we've beat that horse to death here. So a quick word on fires, because that's the other trifecta here that you're going to face. So Jack does a tremendous job in keeping the PCTA trail closures page updated. So I put the link here, and I followed it very closely last year. I was basically copying and pasting what he put up there every day and putting it on the water report, so you guys, you have multiple sources of information there. But there's also this Firefinder app, which is just another source. And I know I just said don't rely solely on electronics, but I think you got to use both. But always rely on paper as being the 100% handy one. But this Firefinder app is pretty handy. Now, I put this image on the right here because I actually saw this fire firsthand. It wasn't right on the PCT last year, but it was close. Fires are something you don't mess with them. They're extremely dangerous. They change very quickly. They can accelerate at incredible speeds. I mean, I'm sure everyone heard about the Santa Rosa fires just a couple of months ago. I happen to live in the Bay Area, thankfully not in Santa Rosa, but they were saying that fire was moving at hundreds of feet per second because of the winds. Now that's the extreme, obviously, but the point I'm trying to get across is these things can change quicker than you can run. You cannot outrun them if it goes towards your direction. So don't mess with them. Don't hike into areas that have official closures in them, because I hear hikers doing this every year, and it's very dangerous. And not only are you putting yourself in danger, but you're putting search and rescue people in danger too. And fires it's every year it's different. Last year was one of the worst years I've ever seen, but it seems like the themes that I've seen develop, there's always fires in Southern California, although last year it wasn't too bad. In time of hiking season, the year before, it was fairly bad, and you'll see on the next slide. But every year, Oregon in particular just seems to have a lot of fires. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Check the PCTA Trail Closures page every time you come into cell phone coverage, just to make sure you're not walking into a fire. And keep us updated. Send in updates to us at the PCT Water Report. I'll put them up online. I'll make sure Jack gets that information too. And we just want to make sure you guys are having the most up-to-date information so you're making safe decisions. And one other comment on that point, it's kind of after the fire has gone down, but there's this funny thing called poodle dog bush, which you may have heard about already. It's primarily in Southern California, although I've seen it as far north as the Southern Sierras. And this is what it looks like. It's a rather benign-looking bush, but it acts like poison oak. And the reason we put this here is because it only only gestates, or I don't know what the correct term is, it only blooms after a big fire comes through. And the seeds lie dormant in the earth, a fire comes through, and then a year or 2 years later, they pop up all over the place. And they're pretty big bushes, as you can see in that photo on the right. And if you rub up against them, from what I understand, it's not an oil like poison oak, but it's like a barb that gets into your skin. But the effects are similar to poison oak, but a lot worse. A lot of people have been sent to the hospital, from rubbing up against these things and you just didn't know it. So I just highlighted here some of the sections that I think could be potentially, poodle dog bush ridden. There's some very remarkable trail crew people who have been clearing big sections in Section D from the Blue Cut and Pilot Fire there, as you can see. But I think the fires in 2016 are gonna make a lot of this pop up. So just be aware of it. Know what it looks like. If you smell something that smells vaguely like marijuana, that could be poodle dog bush. It kind of has that similar scent to it. And just don't rub up against it. And if you come across sections of trail where you're seeing that it's totally overgrown the trail, send an update into me at the Water Report, and I'll get it up on the Water Report webpage. Okay, so that was the last slide, and I feel kind of bad. I feel like we're just talking about all the negative things, and fires and water crossings and snow. It's not as dangerous as we're making it sound, because you're getting everything all in one big bucket here. But we thought it was really important to try to get out in front of the class of 2018 earlier than later, and just educate you on the things you're going to run into. And so that you can start planning for it now, you can start educating yourself, you can start asking questions, and most importantly, make safe and smart decisions. But overall, have fun out there. It's a great experience. It's a life-changing experience. You're going to have the time of your life out there. But we just, speaking for myself, and I think I can speak for Ned and Jack here, we don't want to see any more people pass away on the trail from river crossings or fires or dehydration. So please be safe out there. I think there were a few questions here we hadn't quite answered yet, so I'm gonna get to those here. So Steve says, Ned, due to the very long length of the whippet, how does one successfully utilize it for self-arrest without jabbing yourself in the stomach if you fall down a slope head first, which requires a turning maneuver? I've actually wondered that myself, so if you want to spend some time on that, that'd be good.
We teach self-arrest with a whippet. And of course, some of our students have ice axes too, but when you use the whippet or an ice axe, there is one takeaway expression when in the heat of a tumble, because you don't just slide down the hill and like it's a slip and slide. You're usually caught off guard, you're usually bouncing, tumbling, twisting, and all that kind of stuff. The one expression takeaway is go to the pick. Whatever shoulder, when you take your whippet, and of course you always hold it with the pick coming out the little finger, so you're using it to balance yourself, you're working your way across this slippery slope, and you suddenly post hole, for example, it throws your body downhill, you find yourself landing on your side or whatever. Whichever hand has the whippet, it comes straight up to that shoulder, pick forward, so your thumb is up against your shoulder, and you roll your body to the shoulder that has the pick. So go to the pick. Now, if the pole length, as you say in your question, is long, and obviously it is, you've got to get that pole out of the way. So most of the time, this is a two-handed maneuver. When the hand with the pick comes up to that shoulder, the other hand grabs the pole down low around your waist, which is the same maneuver you're going to do with an ice axe anyway. So this is a simple thing that's taught whichever way you first learn. But remember, go to the pick. And really, in the heat of the moment, that's the takeaway. The length of the pole doesn't matter. There is a maneuver you do if you're rolling toward the direction where the pole is in the way. Then you simply center the pole sort of down the length of your body and continue to go to the pick. You just got to get the pole out of the way.
All right, thanks. Jimmy asks, is the road from Independence to Onion Valley Campground over Kearsarge cleared all year? I don't know the answer to that. Does Jack or Ned, do you know, do they keep that thing open year-round? I imagine they can't.
Yeah, I can chime in. Hey, this is Jack. Good question. So no, I don't believe it's open year-round. I think it's open or closed from November through May. And just in general, We are sort of third-party sources of information. I always encourage you to call up the land managers. So that would be Inyo National Forest out there. They have a good website, and the federal land managers at Forest Service, National Park Service, BLM are always happy to help. But yeah, that's not open year-round.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Adam, I'm going to save your question towards last because that's going to be a longer answer. Martin, looks like there were some more comments I may have missed here. Let's see. Gary, I'm glad the Ponderosa fire didn't get you. That was a pretty nasty one, that's for sure. Martin asked a question on cell service. Do you have a sense of which networks offer better or worse coverage along the PCT? Ernest described with Verizon. I can speak from experience with AT&T, which is not that great. So I don't have Verizon, but that seems to be the general consensus I've got from other hikers that Verizon is better than AT&T. And then Gary said PCTmap.net has a cell service page. Okay, that's good information. Although you can't rely on getting cell phone coverage whenever you want it out there for obvious reasons.
No.
Yeah, and then okay, so that leaves Adam's question, which is, this question has been going around Facebook a lot the last week. He asked, would you have entered the Sierra in 2017, and if so, when? How would this decision affect your gear approach in Southern California? How would it affect further north of the Sierra? So, Ned, I know you've been fielding that one a lot recently. Do you want to chime in on that?
Well, actually, it is a bit of a bigger answer. Hear from Jack first, or somewhere, whenever you think, Matt, regarding the causes of the death and how to avoid them. So will that be fit in before we get too far into the bigger answers?
Well, yeah, I'm happy to chime in. So in a really big snow year, and most years, I encourage people not to enter the Sierra Nevada too early. And it really depends upon your physical fitness, your knowledge, your experience, your equipment, your risk tolerance, and the specific conditions that you're going to face. But entering the Sierra Nevada quite early in the season is pretty risky, and it is truly ski season out there. So I recommend giving snow time to melt and then going fast once it does melt. Through hiking the PCT is a huge challenge, and it might not be something that everyone can achieve every season. So some people, especially the less strong hikers or people with less good balance or lower risk tolerance, should wait for even more of that snow to melt. Your average backpacker should really wait for a lot of snow to melt. Strong through hikers can wait for some of it to melt, but will need to go in a heavy snow year before some of it melts if they hope to get to Canada before October, unless you're super fast. And if you're super fast, you're probably also quite a skilled snow hiker. So there's a lot of things to gauge, but don't underestimate it. The stream crossings are objectively dangerous. There is some risk of twisting your knee, throwing out your back, breaking your leg. And then there's some risk of dying during those stream crossings or on steep snow. There's also sort of caution about being overly focused on the fatalities. It really is truly terrible that PCT hikers have died, but there are far more serious incidents than there are fatalities. And just let that sink in, that the chances of something going wrong are not insignificant. If you're out there when there is snow, this is not normal backpacking, and it might not be appropriate for everybody.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Very, very well said. Let's see. Allie asks, what temperatures should we expect in the high Sierras in May? I mean, I understand that it can get very cold at times, and obviously we should be prepared for that, but I'm wondering what temperatures expect long term. How likely is it to go more than 3 days without temperature above freezing? I've never entered the Sierra in May, so maybe Ned or Jack, you want to tackle that one?
We go in every year around the end of April, and we start running our trips from then till July, depending upon how much snow is there and the number of people that want to learn how to be safe on snow. So for the last, I don't know, 20 years, I suppose, we've seen variations, obviously, in snow depth and so forth. So to ask what's the average temperature or whatever in May, what was it, 14 or 15 or something like that, was a real drought winter. And in May, it was almost becoming like summer. It was crazy. Whereas this last May, after a heavy winter, it was still snowing like mad. We had 2 and 3 foot dumpages on our tents in the area around Mount Whitney in May. Two big storms came through. But then how many days will be will stay around freezing? No, they don't, even when it's snowing. Classically, you'll have nights that are below freezing, and they go down into the teens or the 20s during the day. Even if it's snowing, it's probably going to be about 28, 36. And if the sun is out in May, it might be 40 degrees, in the middle of the day. So it's not a series of a whole lot of cold. It goes in waves as the fronts blow by.
Yeah, I mean, Ned's spot on. It's highly variable in May, but you asked if it was likely to not have temperatures above freezing. No, I would say that it's quite likely that during the daytime it's going to go above freezing, 40, 50 degrees. The significant threat isn't as much the minimum cold temperatures, but it's the possibility of fresh snowstorms. So in May, it's still quite likely that you'll have a foot of snow, 1.5 feet of snow, or even more fall in a single snowstorm. And then it's really back into winter mode at that point. So I would not encourage you to go out unprepared, inexperienced, ultralight backpacking equipment. If you're going to be going out in May, make sure that you have some backcountry ski experience.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay. Ernest says you need to explain what a strainer is and why it's important to stay away from logs. You want to take on it?
Sorry, most people won't know what the heck a strainer is. They'll think, okay, I need something for cooking in the kitchen, a strainer or something, spaghetti. Strainers are in logs that are going across the creek or maybe part way into the creek that are somewhat submerged and so forth, but not completely. Bushes that are, or branches that are halfway into the creek. What the deal is here is that if you lose it and you lose your balance, you're halfway across the creek and you go under and you're bouncing down amongst the boulders and you're coming up to this branch, what's going to happen is you could go under that branch and get pinned, stuck in it and held under the water and drown. And I believe that was and maybe Jack, you know better, wasn't that the demise of Randy Morgensen, the Kings Canyon National Park Ranger of many, many years?
No, I don't think so. But he did die.
Oh, okay. Okay, so maybe he went under snow or whatever the deal was. But when you cross the creek, guys, you got to evaluate not only the point where you're crossing, but you got to look downstream. If I lose it in the water where I'm about to cross, what am I going to get stuck under or stuck in or go over? Because we had a number of, particularly tourists this last year, who got into creeks trying to cross them, or crazily enough, playing in the water at the top of a unseen, supposedly, waterfall, and they got swept to their death over the waterfall. So take a look at what's downstream.
All right, thanks, guys. See, Beaver Stick. Oh, that's a great show name. Beaver Stick writes, I have very little hiking experience in snow, but I am faster than an average hiker, so I've chosen to start at Campo in mid-May, and will probably hit the Sierra in late June. Is that a smart strategy for someone like me with little snow experience?
I'm happy to take this one.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Hey, Beaver Stick, yeah, great trail name. I think that is a pretty good strategy. Mid-May is a fine time to start the PCT. Just make sure that you're honing up your knowledge about heat-related issues. So that's the signs, symptoms, and treatment of heat stroke, heat illness, and hyponatremia, so that you know what your line is. In May, in June, in the desert, it starts getting pretty hot. But again, the weather is all across the board. And anytime it's over about 90 degrees and you're hiking hard, you need to make sure that you're paying attention to your body. If you start feeling dizzy or sweating weirdly or being a little confused, that's a real threat to life. So hikers across Southern California need to know the signs and symptoms of heat illness. We did have a thru hiker die last year because of that, or we think because of that. That's really important. And then if you're a pretty fast hiker, I think that mid-June time is a pretty good time to enter the Sierra in a normal year. June 15th in a normal year is still going to have significant snow, but will be after the peak of the snow. So if you're maybe June 20th or something leaving Kennedy Meadows, if it's a normal year, the danger should be greatly reduced, and seems like a pretty reasonable strategy to me.
All right. Thanks, Jack. So I think we've answered all the questions here. Unless anyone else has any other questions, we can wrap it up. I just want to say thank you for joining here. This is the first safety webinar that we've done, so I wasn't quite sure how it was going to go, but I hope it was helpful for you guys. We just want to make sure you guys have a safe and fun hike. And if you have any questions, you know how to reach us. And we'll just go from there. So, are there any other questions before we end this? I will take silence as a no. So, Jack, Ned, any final thoughts before we head out?
Go ahead, Jack.
Hey, everyone that's listening or watching later on YouTube, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm really kind of buoyed that you are taking safety seriously and doing your planning. And my big tip is to get out and go hiking between now and your thru hike. Be strong, be prepared, and have a fantastic summer. The PCT is truly amazing.
Cool. Matt, if I could add that we will be performing, or not performing, we will be presenting a special intimate PCT presentation in Auburn, California, the first weekend in January, where I'm going to be talking at length about how the long trail, how hiking for months at a time changes people from the inside out. And of course, we'll have lots of Q&A and a lot to talk about the trail, and I'm going to be also 74 slideshow, so you'll see lots of perspective on how things were done back then and how they're done now. We'll talk a lot about that. But this is a charity event that, matter of fact, is benefiting the PCTA. And I think, Jack, you have been approached on that, correct? No, Jack.
Sorry, what was that?
Matt?
He was asking you to repeat, Ed.
Oh, I can't hear him at all. Yeah, I just was wondering if Jack has been approached by the organizers of this event in Auburn, because the PCTA is one of the charities that are benefiting from the proceeds of the sales of the tickets to get into the theater where this is going to be held for 2 nights.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ned. It sounds great.
Cool. Just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this is going to be coming up. It'll be a unique perspective because we're talking about the inner changes that hikers go through.
Great, guys. Yeah, so we'll be doing more of these webinars as the 2018 hiking season approaches. Keep your eyes out for one specific for the water report. We'll do another one specifically for the Sierra like we did last year. You can see, though, we did 2 of them last year for the Sierra that you can do anytime on the YouTube PCT Water channel. And if there's any other kind of webinars you guys think would be helpful, let us know. This is, it's a free service. We just want to give you all the information to have a safe and healthy hike, and yeah, we'll go from there. So thank you everyone for attending, and look forward to following your PCT hike in 2018. I'll go ahead and end the webinar now.